We were talking about something interesting here, Chafin. In your world, I know it's probably easier for you because you can talk to the guys and maybe get a feel of their personality. But how important do you think this whole recruiting profile is? Recruiting a player that has whatever it is that we're looking for in a player versus like the outward physical attributes that maybe some other teams don't see. Like what's that mixing of those worlds look like for you when you look at good recruiters?
Well, I think it's always important if you're, recruiting, you're assessing, does this guy fit our locker room? I think that's always, I think that's an important part of it. And I think part of the transition for Matt Rule was, and we're going to use the big C word here, creating the culture where you have a locker room of guys that have respect for one another, that can play with one. Then there's obviously going to be differences inside every locker room. Like there's not everyone's going to think the same thing or have the same opinions or whatever it is. But I do think it's important that when you're looking at recruits, you're also identifying and evaluating personalities. You're evaluating fit between the position coach and the player. You're evaluating fit between the player and the locker room. I mean, there's been some talented guys that have come to Nebraska and since I've been covering it, that just weren't personality fits for whatever reason. We're going to be too shy or too brash, weren't going to get along with anyone, potentially just maybe lack the social skills to be able to engage, and that puts you in a tough spot. So I think that's always a part of it. I don't know that it's the end all be all, but you certainly, when you take these commitments, it's with the idea that they're going to be part of something, that they're not just going to stand out on their own.
Mm.
We're talking with Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, what do you think is more important if you're a developmental program the way that Nebraska says they want to be? Is it identifying the end product that a guy needs to look like in order to be able to get him there, or that mindset piece that we're talking about of how a guy is wired and how he fits?
I don't know that you can. It's one of those tough either or questions, because you need a combination of both, right? Like you can't have just one but not the other. But I guess to me, in order to be a developmental program, you need everyone sort of pulling in the same direction. So if you've got that one guy who's just going opposite of everything you're trying to do, or the one guy who just doesn't fit with it's just not going to work. He's not going to develop in the same rate. I think in the way that Nebraska wants to build, the kind of example of it is when a developer goes and buys a neighborhood and puts up a bunch of houses that are, mostly similar. It's the same developers, it's like you're trying to do, there's some differences in there, but you're putting up the same development, the same neighborhood. You wouldn't just have someone, build a McMansion in the middle of a $180,000 to $200,000 starter home neighborhood. Like it's just I think you're trying to keep things similar because the way for it all to come together has to be similar, and then some differences can emerge, in there too. But I just don't know. I just don't think you're going to have a lot of success if you have someone come in who can't go in the same direction that you're going to go. It just seems like, especially with Matt Rule, who tends to kind of call these guys out when they come from in the transfer portal, when they, I'm thinking of Mazuka. I'm thinking of some of the other guys that they've had, he sort of says like, they don't know how it is to work like we do. They don't know. And so it's
even inheriting Tommy Hill, right?
I mean, I think it's assimilating to the idea of what you are, because no individual is going to be bigger than where you want to go. And I think that's a primary part of the Matt Rule process.
It's pretty amazing that you said everybody pulling in the same directions. I go back to listening to, and I asked some of the recruits that you talked to, Shafe. I thought there's two people they need to take on the road with them. One of them is Corey Campbell. The other is Kristen Coggins. Like, if those two could get on the road and go recruit and do their pitch, it'd be wildly successful, because pulling in the same direction, they're so confident in what they do. There's just certain measurables that they think that they can get you to, whether it's your muscle mass, whether it's the weight that you can carry versus your maximum output, whether it's the certain benchmarks that you can hit at top speed versus your ability to maintain versus, weighted balance off of one leg versus two. They have all these metrics and they'll show them to you. If you get to here, you stand this chance of next level. This is where next level guys are. Trust, just do what we tell you. We'll get you there. The nutrition matches up with the strength and conditioning. It matches up with the staff. They know that, like a Kai Wall, like you can just tell that, okay, he's 2 years out. He's 1.5 years out. He's kind of ready to play like Umame Wellen, but he has a few deficiencies. So while we're situationally using him, we'll put this guy in his, it's like you can, that's a fantastic point you made about everybody pulling in the same direction, because I think we assume it, but we've seen from some other staffs, there's no way that it's always that case.
No, I mean, just to use the last staff as an example, it wasn't even that way with something like recruiting. I mean, you had guys going out and accepting commitments at positions that weren't theirs for players that the position coach didn't want to it just, if you don't have that, and you were talking strength and conditioning, and in my head, I was thinking about, okay, this all works in the same operation like a restaurant, like your front of the house and the back of your house. All of it needs to work together so everything looks the way that it should, which means the position coaches have to sort of work in a way that fits with what Matt Rule wants, because that all lines up with what Corey Campbell and the nutrition staff are doing to build the players to put in front of the position coaches. And then if you extrapolate that out to the players and you go into last year, for example, that if you are all moving in this direction, if the guy in front of you goes down, you know what you're supposed to be doing because of what he's been doing in front of you. So you're going to start emulating that because he's emulating what's in front of him. And you have natural growth in that progression because you understand it's supposed to look like it's a, like it's a moving line. I keep using different metaphors, but it's like a factory. I mean, there's just piece after piece, just line assembly. That's sort of what they're trying to do. That's how they want to build this program. And obviously you're going to have some special pieces in there that elevate everything else. And that's where, we can get into some of the Dylan Raiola conversation, but they have to continue to develop that. And again, if you have multiple or even just one going the other way, it hurts the overall production.
So I'm glad that you both brought those things up, because that's why I framed the question in the way that I did. Because yes, pulling in the same direction is incredibly important, but what direction is that, right? That's where the end product and knowing what that looks like becomes incredibly crucial. Because if everybody's pulling in the same direction, but the direction's off by about 10 degrees, you don't really get where you want to go.
Yeah. So,
right?
so Coop, for example, this is one that came into my brain when you were describing the coach thing and like waiting. It's like, let's say this is a total hypothetical, but Schaefer, is this not what you're talking about? Like when you get to the player, like let's say you move Hartzog. Okay. All right. We're a little thin at corner. We got to move Hartzog right now because he's ready. He's ready to go. He's got game experience. But in the meantime, Campbell and Kristen and those guys know, okay, for Jeremiah Charles and Ethan Nation, they need to get a little bigger, a little stronger. So that's their focus. While we're buying time with Hartzog, okay, guys, are we cool? Let's get Nation and I'm again, this is
Jeremiah Charles, whoever.
Jeremiah Charles. Let's get them a little more bigger, a little more bigger, a little bigger, a little more physical, and everybody's on that same page. So if you ever get to a point where you want to move Hartzog back, you are already thinking that, okay, now it's Charles or Nations or Boodles or whomever. It's their time now because this is the facet that everybody was on board with their development. Like, is that?
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially you're building on the back end, so you're ready the next time you need to replace a piece on the front end. I mean, that's sort of what it is. I mean, that's the kind of development that people have claimed to be clamoring for. Like, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to set it up so that when you lose pieces, because college athletics is nothing if not losing pieces. You don't get to have these players forever. You have to have people ready to replace them. How do you replace them? It's not as simple as just going into the transfer portal or going into, getting a recruit. They have to be mentally ready. They need to be physically ready. They have to have been tested to a degree. They have to have shown you that they're able to do it. And then you put them in and you see how they do. And you follow that and you see where that growth goes. And in the meantime, as soon as that person moves up, there's somebody that needs to be behind them so that chain keeps moving. I mean, that's the whole process.
So, Schaefer, the next links in that chain are going to start coming on campus this month. Another big June for Nebraska. Who are some of the names that you're most interested in, both in terms of their profile and in terms of guys you think are maybe right on that border of being ready to commit?
I think you got some obviously interesting people coming in. That last weekend in June is just huge. You've got your committed guys are going to be here. I think you have some guys that are going to be on campus where it's a lot of just like, all right, we're here to kind of check that box, and then we're either going to announce while we're here or we're going to announce shortly after we're here. Jamarian Parker is certainly someone I'm keeping a lot of attention on, the running back from Cardinal Ritter Prep that was committed to Arkansas. I think Nebraska is in a good spot there. Yeah. There's an offensive lineman out of Hawaii, Houston Kahina Torres, I believe it's how that's pronounced. I would look for him to be potentially part of this class. He just visited Michigan State. I think he's got one more trip. I want to say it's Arizona. And then he's coming to Nebraska on the 21st. He's been talking about this Nebraska visit for like a year now. So that feels, if the door is open, that one feels good. There's a whole bevy of guys coming in, and then you've got the guys that already sort of visited, like Dawson Merritt might be the most interesting recruit that Nebraska's after right now. And you're in a 1v1 battle with Alabama, who's going to have him on campus this week. And, I thought there was a chance where things had gone so far. I thought there was a chance that maybe Nebraska could try to pull that commitment before the Alabama visit even happens. But they're certainly going to be working on that throughout. So June is going to be a really, really busy month. And that's to say nothing of all of the camps and the guys that are going to be coming in that are going to try to get offers at these camps. Like we saw last year, some of those guys are going to end up on the official visit list. It's a big month for your in-state players that aren't committed to you yet. You got Christian Jones and Chase Lofton, and
Christian's the 14th.
Yep, and Chase is the 21st, I believe. I think the kid from Platteview, whose name
Ryan Ziebert.
Yeah, I change his name in my head every time. I was going to call him Robert Ziman. I don't know why. That's what I was going to do. I apologize to him and to I cannot get that name straight to save my life. So he's just the kid in Platteview until I can nail that down. But they have an opportunity to kind of stack some commitments here. It wouldn't shock me if it's a double-digit commitment month in June, because I think the final checkoff is coming for some of these players.
You think I would know because I could simply ask him, but I don't, because it's just not the information that I want out of him. But you think Merritt and Jones are connected or no?
I don't think it's a take one and don't take the other situation. Now, I can't speak to if one commits before the other, would they be as interested knowing that person is there? But I guess I don't see why they would have to be remotely adversarial in terms of how they could help Nebraska. If they're both interested in going to Nebraska and they both want to play for Tony White and play linebacker for Rob Dvorak in this defense, you can use both of them. Mm-hmm. Nebraska is not at the point, and I don't know that Nebraska will ever be at the point where you're looking at guys the caliber of Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt, and you're like, well, we only need one of you. So, from Nebraska's perspective, you're recruiting the hell out of each of them. It's harder to say for them internally, but here's the thing, and I don't remember, it might have been Chase Lofton I was talking to last week, and he said this about the tight ends, because I asked him, like, Nebraska took 45 tight ends in their class last year. They've offered $1 billion this year. They already have a tight end commitment in Bear Tenney. Like, what does that tell you about the tight end room? And he goes, well, it tells me that they want talent. And if I want to go there, I'm going to have to work to compete and play. And that doesn't bother me. And so if that's your mindset, if that's your mentality, I don't understand why either Christian Jones or Dawson Merritt would have a concern with the other one it's doing. I think they'd welcome the opportunity to have more talent in the room because it means your team's going to be better.
You just had boots on the ground watching local guys. What were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't even – Isaac Jensen wasn't even there, and Millard South, just like Jet Tamala, has 4, I think 6'4" or bigger targets that he can throw to at any time. And then you have a Marion Jackson who's not as tall, but he is no less talented. He's a guy I'm fascinated what box he didn't check for the local staff. I don't know if it's a speed thing. I'm not sure what it is. Certainly don't get the sense that he's going to show up in camp and try to earn an offer that way. But he's a talented guy. Every time I've watched him play, I've come away impressed by his kind of he wins a lot of contested catches.
Yes, he does.
And I think he runs good routes. I think he has good hands, and he wins a lot of contested catches. He also, and I don't know if this is a Nebraska thing. I don't know if this is just how he always carries himself. There's a little bit of an edge to him that I kind of like.
Spot on.
I like the edge. I like that it's like he's got a voice in his head where he's always hearing his doubters and he has to prove them wrong all the time.
That's his dad, boy.
That's how he comes off, and that's how he plays. And sometimes when you play angry like that, you can be a pretty good player. And so I was impressed with what they have going on at Millard South. I didn't watch any of I watched a lot of 7-on-7 stuff with them. I didn't watch the offensive line, but Amarian, he called me over. He's like, you got to talk to Carter Glab. I met Carter Glab, and I texted you about him. And this is a guy that's got Power 5, or not Power 5 anymore, Power 4 schools, Power Conference schools, reaching out to him, wanting him to camp. They're interested in him. He's an interior offensive lineman in the 2026 class. So he's a guy that I will be keeping an eye on going forward. Jet Tamala, I'm fascinated what that looks like, where teams kind of settle in with him. I don't know if he's necessarily a power quarterback, but there's certainly teams that are interested. Iowa State, Northwestern, Nebraska all want to have him out camping and to see what he has going on. And then I was also over at Central, and Elijah Wayne and Ike Ackerman jump off a little bit there, and those seem like
big fans of both, Schaefer.
Would not be shocked if Nebraska comes away offering one of those guys here this month during camp. I don't know if both are going to get an offer. I don't know if it's an NIL scholarship type deal. I don't know what it would be, but I think Nebraska likes both of those guys. And I can see why they like both of those guys.
Neither guy needs a babysitter, Schaefer.
Yeah, well, they're both just stand-up grown men. I mean, and I don't want this to come across negative. There is a different conversation you have in my job when you're talking to Torrey Pittman and Kylan Haney, who are 2027s. They're just going to be sophomores, and how they're talking and what they're saying versus when you're talking to guys who are conducting business and view this and have been through the ringer a little bit and don't have those early offers the way that Haney and Pittman do. I was super impressed by Elijah Wayne and by Ike Ackerman last week, and I'm excited to see kind of what they can do with Central this year with that defensive front. They've got some big guys in the middle. They can push some people around, and then you have 2 potential edge rushers that are going to be hard for offensive linemen in Class A to control those guys. So, and then of course I mentioned I saw Haney and Pittman, and it was my first time putting eyes on Pittman. I mean, he's got a presence. That guy, you can tell that he can play, and I'm really intrigued by him. Looks like he's going to be a defensive back at the next level. He seems to have a lot of attention already sort of coming in from different schools who are intrigued by him. And then Nebraska obviously has made the offer. And then, Haney, it was funny in our conversation. A lot of it was there's only one football, but there's multiple of you Central running backs. And he's like, no, I'm the guy. I'm going to make sure I'm the guy. He made it clear that the only way other people were going to play is when he put Central in the lead, that other people could come in. And I appreciated that. I liked it. I liked some of the brashness. You don't always get that with Nebraska kids. So when you do, I do appreciate it.
That's Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, we appreciate it as always. We will catch up again next week.
Thanks, Schaefer.
Thanks for letting me run long.